All right, there are a lot of different aspects with political borders, just divisions between states, and they reflect a lot of different things. So down there, I have the border of the United States and Mexico, and just what that looks like, because borders look very different around the world. Because if I had a border of the United States and Canada up there, there's for the most part nothing there. But when you do cross a border, it is a pretty big deal because you are now under the jurisdiction and sovereignty of a completely different state. And then even the subnational borders come into play here as well. Now, so before there were borders, so for most of history, there were what were called frontiers. If the border is over there, well, then who controls where does that line set? And that's where that's really important to look at because resources. For a long time, Argentina and Chile, they just said the border was the mountains, but then who controls the resources within the mountains? And so they actually drew a line. They took the 10 highest peaks in the Andes and they drew a line between the 10 of them. They said that's where the border. And so basically now in the world, borders have been drawn all over the place. This is Mark Sykes. Sykes-Picot Agreement. It basically drew up or divided up the Ottoman Empire, Britain and France. And that was how they drew it up for basically the borders of the Middle East were created by Britain and France. I have a former colleague who once said, find me a conflict in the world around borders and I'll show you where the British drew them. And he's not necessarily wrong because basically the British drew all the borders in the Middle East. They were a part of them in Africa. They were a part of them with India and Pakistan. And so basically you're looking at a lot of the world's international conflicts are there. Now here's a chart. Let's look at here just the different types of borders. You will need to know these and be able to come up with examples of each. Antecedent border, something that was there before a large population was present. Subsequent or cultural, there is a technical difference. I'm not going to go into it a bunch between the two. It basically, a subsequent boundary is something that's drawn to accommodate something, and a culture would be when it's drawn to accommodate culture. Relic boundary is something that no longer exists, and I'm going to have examples of these coming up, guys. Superimposed is most of Africa, because that's the Berlin Conference of 1884, or back to the Sykes-Picot Agreement. A lot of borders in the world today are militarized, where the border is heavily guarded. North and South Korea is the best example of that with the demilitarized zone. There are some open border areas. The best example of the world is the Schengen area in Europe, where you can just walk across with no issue whatsoever. Excuse me. A natural border based on the physical features. We already talked about one between Chile and Argentina, but there's many others out there. And geometric is one, there's straight line. And by the way, you could be both. So like the border between Libya and Egypt is also a superimposed boundary. Okay. So 4.4 and 4.5 do kind of run together here, so we are going to keep going. Okay. What do political borders look like when they're functioning? So first of all, borders are going to create landlocked countries, and it is meant to be a landlocked country. There are 43 landlocked countries in the world. Can you find the only double A landlocked country? You find it. It's okay. Where a country is bordered by also completely landlocked countries. And that causes different issues for them because what they need to do is figure out, okay, we have to cooperate and no matter what. So the easy one I like to pick on down here is Lesotho right here is that they need to figure out, okay, how are we going to work with South Africa? Now, many other countries don't get to work with other countries with this. So it does make you limited and you have to work with others within there or else you have to basically figure out how you're going to make it work because realize that borders go from the ground all the way up to space and they also go into the ground that way. If you look here, border disputes, positional. Let me get to where's Iraq? Here we go. Iraq went to war with Kuwait because what they did is they said they basically blamed Kuwait for stealing some of their oil and then used it to go in there. Now, border disputes, you don't need to memorize these. It's just good knowledge here of how this plays out. So positional issues, territorial issues, functional issues, or resource issues. So, for example, this is Antarctica. No country, they signed a treaty in 1959 that basically governed how Antarctica would work. You can do research down there, but no military installations whatsoever. But as opposed to the Arctic, which is one of the most convoluted and difficult places right now in the world, because as the ice cap melts, what you have is different countries have different claims because of how their continental shelf works. And so Denmark has claims, Canada has significant claims, Russia has significant claims, Norway has significant claims, Iceland not as much. But I mean, you just have these borders are a mess, and people are trying to gain soft power and soft influence in the region for shipping lanes that are going through here, for oil that is being readily more easy to discover within this region. And so it's a mess. This claim was supposed to be done in 2010, and as of 2020, it's not even close. How about in Greece? Or I'm sorry, in Cyprus, where you have the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish here. They don't agree on a lot. For all practical purposes, the island of Cyprus functions as two different countries, with the Greeks here and the Greek Cypriots here and the Turkish Cyprus in the north. Ukraine. This is a concept called irredentism. The Ukraine here, if you put the border right here where the yellow and blue meet, then it would be a nation state. But it's not. It's all the way out here. And so Russians have put a dent into Ukraine. The group of people known as the Russians have put a dent. That means that Russia could potentially, and has, put significant claims and soft political power influence. When you have irredentism, you're asking for political issues. Let's look here. Okay, so this is Yugoslavia, which had wars throughout the 90s. You look here and you can see here, irredentism. I mean, it's just irredentism all over the place, or right here with Kosovo. We already talked about that one. The last thing to talk about here in this one is the function of political borders is the UN Convention on Law of the Seas. So there's basically, this is who runs the seas. In reality, this is what a political map of the world should look like. What you have here is basically there's three different rules. Okay, that you control militarily 12 miles off your coast. Okay, that is completely yours. It is like it is land. Okay, so 12 miles. Once you hit that 13th mile, you hit something different where you have limited sovereignty. You can do some things there, but it's really not a ton. It's mainly 12 and 200 are the important ones here. Once you hit 200, or 200 and in, you own all the resources. So that's what this map shows. And that's really important because of islands. Now, they have to be naturally created islands. Man-made islands do not count. But what you have here is, so like take the United States. The United States controls 200 miles off the border of where Hawaii is. Big deal. That's why the Arctic is such an issue, because all their 200 miles oversect with each other. And what that also looks at then is like, what about down here, Gulf of Mexico? Well, it's whoever can draw the closest and straightest line to it. So like if something is within 200 miles of both the United States and Mexico, which obviously is going to occur in multiple spots, okay, the United States can draw a line that's 10 miles and Mexico can draw a line that's 8. Well, it's then Mexico's. All right. But here's another way here to look at it. This is, I think, a really clear look here. Once you get over 200 miles, now it's no state has control and it's governed under something completely different. And our last slide here is the effects of borders. It does a lot. Borders do a lot of different things. Okay, separate groups of people, combine groups of people, shatter belts, interaction, conflict, syncretism is combining of things. Migration. So if you look here at Africa, this is an ethnic map of Africa, what the border should roughly look like if you were going by ethnicity. Or you could look at it this way, where here's a political map based on the languages of the region of what it would look like. Well, what does that mean when the borders don't? Well, start looking at all this. The Berlin Conference of 1884 set all of these borders up, with the exception of South Sudan, which isn't in here now, or which is there now. What did that cause? Groups of people are separated, like the Hutus, and it combines people, like in Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis. Conflict is going to exist. I mean, take Nigeria. Nigeria being the most populous country in Africa, most populous country in Africa, and also the most economical power in Africa. Well, look at by language, you're looking at 3. And there's so many different ethnic groups within Nigeria. How should borders look? And here's what it looked like in 1884, and there's what it was afterwards. I mean, take this region right here of kind of East Africa. Ethiopia and Eritrea, long civil war. Sudan, South Sudan. I mean, eventually in 2011, it resulted in South Sudan being independent. Darfur had a genocide. Somalia, civil war ravaged. multiple different autonomous regions. It is really hard to come up with borders that work really well. Make sure you know the UN Convention on Law of the Seas. Make sure you know irredentism, and make sure you know, there we go, the different types of borders.